Welcome back. On Capitol Hill, the controversy over Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation to the nation's highest court grinds on, at least temporarily hamstrung by an allegation of attempted sexual assault when the nominee was 17 years old. After decades of silence, Christine Blasey Ford now claims a drunken Kavanaugh tried to rape her 36 years ago at a party in Bethesda, Maryland, around 36 years. Kavanaugh categorically denies the charge, the timing of which many Republicans find suspect at best, calculated at worst. Both the alleged victim and Senate Democrats, led by Senator Dianne Feinstein, have requested an FBI investigation, a request rejected by Republican Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley. After a weekend of wrangling, it appears that Ford will testify this weekend. I'm going straight to Tomaro Bell.
First off, I don't like the fact that you all use the term crawls out like she's come out of vermin. Do you know what it would take for a woman who has been victimized like that? It takes a while for you to get up the courage. When I was in college, I knew a young lady who was date raped. She refused to report it, said her father would kill him and her family would be devastated. So she sucked it up. I doubt it to this day she told anybody other than the people that was on there. This might have been this lady's final straw. This lady has a PhD. She has went on with her life. She's probably said, I cannot take it. I must say something. To sit up there and say, oh, why didn't you come out there? Why didn't you? That's like saying that to the young girls on a gymnastics team. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you come out? Simone Biles was one of the last women to come out at that time when all her teammates was coming forth. You're going to say she should have said something before she got on the balance bar? Or you should have said something before you come to the Olympics? How you going to condemn somebody for coming out for something that was wrong?
Okay, I'm assuming you have a different view.
I do, and I've said,
of course you do.
I have said on this show that women who have been assaulted deserve a voice, and they deserve to be heard, and that's I have no problem with that. Okay, what has happened here is the Democrats have used this as a political football. Dianne Feinstein had this information weeks and possibly months before she brought it up at the very tail end of this confirmation hearing. She held on to this until the bitter end. If they were serious about the Me Too movement, they would have brought this up sooner and made this part of the conversation earlier. Further, the hypocrisy of the Democrats on this, in the same week that Keith Ellison, the Democrat National Committee deputy chair, has an abuser that has a lot more proof and records and dates and times submitted toward his allegations, sits there and says this very week that he says his accusers are just going to cook up any allegations and we'll see what they bring forward. And the Democrats are silent on him. And they're doing this to Kavanaugh. Where is the equity? Where is the balance? Where is the seriousness about these issues? This is political, and this is wrong.
This guy going for a job. Hold on. His life in this country, and she needed to come forth.
Okay, Nyanza, I want you to make your statement, but I also want you to put on your lawyer hat as well.
Yeah, that's.
If you were Kavanaugh's attorney with this type of accuser coming forward, go ahead, and if you can address that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, if I was Kavanaugh's counsel, I would advise him to be as honest as possible. It is not against the law to have made a mistake. But it is against the law to lie about it. So if you're under oath and you're testifying for a position that you're going to have for the rest of your life, now's the time to come clean and come correctly. I do believe that Kavanaugh is in a situation where his career and his future is being held in the balance by two opposing political sides. And the Supreme Court nomination is never supposed to be political because of the very nature of the job. Unfortunately, I believe that the due process element of all of this has gone a little bit by the wayside, because you have an instant where, you know, we would like to have a woman that's interviewed by a woman, and then there are no women on the judiciary for the Senate, so they have to go find outside counsel that's a female. So that's an issue there. The second issue is that if you're going to have a witness statement from two witnesses only, that's the male accused and the female accuser, when both of them have faded recollections of whether or not the event happened, or when it happened, or where it happened, then that's an issue. But if you have four witnesses that were allegedly at the same event where this may have taken place and they don't recall it, that's not unusual, because it wasn't a traumatic issue for them. Exactly. It's usually traumatic for the person who endures it. If something happens to me and Bob sees it, he may not remember it 35 years from now. But to that end, it's very important to know that if the FBI is not stepping in, The FBI is the only place where if you lie to them, you can go to prison. So maybe the 4 witnesses and maybe the accused and the accuser, maybe they just need to have an FBI investigation, because the Senate confirmation is going to go through. I do not believe Donald Trump is going to ask Kavanaugh to step down. If he does, he's going to do it on his own. But, you know, the politics of it began when they decided to prevent Barack Obama from having his Supreme Court nominee after a full year of waiting.
Bill King, as you've watched this unfold, what's resonated with you as needing discussion?
Well, the thing that I find interesting is the polling has flipped on this in the last month. If you go back about a month ago, the Kavanaugh nomination was above water, about 38 to 28, I think. It's now flipped, and 40% of the American people are opposed to it, and about 28% are for it. Obviously, in this kind of question, you've got a lot of people undecided, but you've basically got nobody except the Republican base supporting it now. And so I think that has some real implications for the midterms. I think the Republicans have handled this very clumsily. And by the way, I don't think it's out of the question that you might lose Flake and Collins. And if you do, then this nomination's in trouble.
Okay, Tony.
Well, I want voters to understand that we are watching systematic oppression. You have a Republican-led Senate that made up these rules out of thin air, made up these deadlines that they're imposing on this process. And if you don't like this, if you don't like the way this woman is being treated, and if you don't like the way the Supreme Court will look with this hanging over its head, you need to vote out Republicans, because really this is appalling to see that we're being oppressed. To me, this is an infringement on not just the Me Too movement, but what our whole process will look like for the Supreme Court. And I want people to understand, if you don't do something about this, this will happen even more, because you're going to have a Republican president, Republican Supreme Court, Republican Senate, Republican House. Only way you can balance that is to vote out Republicans in the Senate and the House.
Final word on this, Bob.
Well, the process is clearly the issue. Whether or not she testifies, whether or not Dr. Ford testifies, is still yet to be determined. She's even wanting to have Kavanaugh testify first. The accuser always goes first. The accuser has to make a claim so that the defendant can then counter that claim. That's the way our legal process works. As for the senators calling for an FBI investigation, what is the FBI going to investigate? The FBI investigates federal crimes. There is no federal crime here. There's not even a prosecutable state crime here. So who is going to make a law enforcement investigation? All we can do is let her have her speak,
systematic oppression.
They do back.
And then let the judge make his counter to that. Let the senators decide on what's going to happen, because there is no time for an investigation, because the Democratic senators didn't allow it.
There's plenty of time.
A near certainty we're going to be talking about this next week.
And the
look
week
forward to it. Okay, when we return, the Carolinas still in crisis as rivers inundated by Florence crest and flood with 44 dead. And the latest natural disaster, are doubts about climate change evaporating? Stick with us.